The man is obviously a lunatic. It's apparent that his actions can only be described as the ravings of a madman.
G'day guys, we are going to talk about ancient aliens. Not really, we're going to talk about Nephilim.
With some backs to the wall, we'll respond to the call. Fall, Goliath, fall, Goliath. Lift the head of the giant, celebrate our defiance. Fall, Goliath, fall, Goliath. Can you smell it in the air, my brethren? It's the beautiful stench of reinvention. Sharpen your axes, resurrect your action.
But it ties in with the ancient aliens, it ties in with a lot of things, so this one's going to go in all different directions, and I'm going to sound like a raving lunatic, so I'm going to live up to the intro. More so than usual this time, because this one just goes everywhere, so I'll try to give you guys a bunch of dot points and summarise them, and then get you guys to just look into them, because it's a fascinating subject, and if I went into every rabbit hole that this particular subject leads down, like history, conspiracy stuff, secret society stuff, if I went down every single one, we'd be here all night and end up like that Altian Childs guy for 5 hours with a dog barking behind me. So I don't want to do that. I'm just going to give you guys a bunch of subjects and look into what I'm talking about. And, you know, some of this is my thoughts on the subject, and some of it's legit history, and some of it's speculation and theories I've got. Genesis 6 is the angels come down and they have a good time with some lady friends, and those lady friends have babies, and they must have hurt giving birth because they were giant babies. So you got these angels come down. The angels were also responsible for teaching humanity a lot of magic, dark arts and stuff, and a lot of strange things as well. So if you look at the book of Enoch, that's really interesting. It gives a bit of insight into this stuff. They taught like girls how to use mirrors and makeup and eyeliner and stuff like that, and also how to like read roots and omens and star sign stuff, and yeah, a bunch of different things. Some things that you wouldn't think, who cares, but it's stuff that it's knowledge that came from heaven that we weren't supposed to have. So it just added to the already evident problem of our sinfulness. These guys eventually got to a point where they were running the earth, and it was super evil, and they were like consuming humans, consuming each other, super evil all the time. There's probably a link between that and why the flood happened. So Chuck Missler does some good talks on this. Their bloodlines, it was obviously containing angel DNA, and that's come down through history, and we've got now these illuminated 13 bloodlines, the Fritz Springmeier bloodlines. Evidently, there's a connection between the crystal skulls. There's 13 crystal skulls that I think symbolize 13 satanic Nephilim bloodline families, and they want to bring all them together and create the Antichrist. I think that's just a theory. I can't prove that, obviously, because it's a theory, but it does line up with, if you look into the crystal skull stuff, it's interesting. So they found there's a bunch of giant bones, Nephilim bones, that have been found all over the world. Included in these were some crystal skulls, and if you watch Indiana Jones, the crystal skull Indiana Jones thing, there was all the Nephilim stuff behind it as well. It was interesting, but yeah, too evil for kids to watch, so I don't recommend watching. And you know, technically, Indiana Jones is a pedo. I think one of his girlfriends in one of the movies, you do the maths, and it ends up being a kid when they got together. Anyway, typical Hollywood pedo stuff. But I digress. The crystal skulls thing, they're elongated skulls. So originally, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be rambling, but just try and hang in there. The elongated skulls thing, their DNA's changed over the time, and it's been slowly watered down. Initially, these things may have looked reptilian in appearance. There's a whole rabbit hole on that I won't really touch on, but I'll just mention reptilian. Incidentally, the snake that talked to Adam and Eve, A, could talk, B, had arms and legs and could walk around. There's a word that describes angels that slightly resembles sort of a snaky reptilian-y creature. Angels can shapeshift, so, and we know that from the Bible. Therefore, I don't know, can their children shapeshift when they mix with humans? I don't know if that carried over or not. I don't know. Theory, they could. I'm not sure. And all over the world, all the different ancient cultures that had gods line up with this narrative, which has been obviously, hushed and removed, or they've put ancient aliens in the place of it to get rid of God in the Bible. But it makes perfect sense when you put the Nephilim lens on pretty much all the other conspiracies. It sort of just solidifies what we already know. So the skulls were elongated, and then as a form of worship in Africa and other places in the world, they'd actually wrap their babies' heads really tight with a piece of cloth and let their heads grow long and band their heads back. So the skulls would literally come back to here, and that was an act of worship to these demigods. So tons of bones of these things found all over the world, all around the place, and then covered up massively. So it used to be, a bunch of farmers would dig up a giant's bones, and it'd be in the local paper, and then the bones would get stolen or they'd get bought for a ridiculous amount, and then it'd all just get hushed up and covered over. So there is undeniable evidence that there was a race of giants living on Earth. Why they get rid of the evidence, there's a bunch of different reasons, a ton of different reasons. A lot of the occult secret society stuff, especially Freemasonry and others as well, stem from the worship of these fallen angels who called themselves gods, and then had these half-breed kids that also were leaders in the world and would take over and run their own little kingdoms. There was more of them than just Goliath and his brothers. There was lots of these guys, to the point where there's a theory that this could be true, it could not be true, but Noah's described as being perfect in his generations, and that's the reason God chooses him. And if you think about it, perfect in generations, it kind of sounds a bit weird, unless you think of it through a DNA perspective. And then if his bloodline wasn't tainted with this Nephilim blood, with this DNA, maybe that's why God picked him. I don't know. Stories all over the world of this giant race that were running the world, and it all parallels perfectly. It's always like, the god had a fight with the other gods, and the other gods came down here, and then those gods had kids, and they were half god, half man, and that's like all through the Greek mythology stuff. It's in like Egyptian stuff. It's veiled, but it's there if you look at it and you see this worldwide flood, all in every culture. There is proof for a worldwide flood in every culture, and it's always hushed up and it's always covered over. But there was giants, undeniably, through every culture recorded, or passed down orally through tradition, like the Indians. I'll get into that in a minute. A lot of the dualism, the Gnosticism, is all linked back to this worship of these fallen angels, the Nephilim, their children, and the worship of the bloodlines, the worship of who's related. So those 13 bloodlines that are doing lots of the moving and shaking behind the scenes in the world today have that blood, and they intermingle between the families and try to keep the bloodlines as pure as possible, but it also creates some defects and stuff like that. There's still, so that they also apparently had 6 fingers and 6 toes, 2 rows of teeth, and there's a bunch of other strange descriptions of these people, and you see traces of it still. So there's traces of like people with 6 fingers and 2 rows of teeth and stuff like that pops up around the place, but the actual full-on giants are not physically recorded in any like footage that's gone viral or anything like that. There's a story about one getting found in Iraq and getting shot down by a team of American soldiers, and then the body being whisked away and it all being hush-hush, and then all those guys died mysteriously in crashes and and it was all covered up. And those soldiers were actually saying, like, we think they're covering it up because it makes the Bible legit. It backs up the Bible. So they're definitely an active plan to cover all the Nephilim history and all the evidence up. They went to the Museum of Baghdad and just like ransacked it, the American army, and just like took all the Nephilim bones and a bunch of other stuff. But a lot of the Nephilim stuff has just gone missing throughout history, or being called dinosaur bones. Now, I do not endorse Eric Dubai, a bit of a mystic New Age sort of light world order stuff, bit dicey, but he does some great flat Earth stuff. I think his video is the one that initially led me to the flat Earth stuff, and then he's got one on dinosaurs that's really good, and it makes you think about an agenda possibly behind the whole dinosaur thing. So there's like a gold rush of dinosaur bones being found, and a lot of them were fake, a lot of them were just guys making stuff up, and then for funding purposes, and I think occult purposes, and also I think big Nephilim bones. And it's considered that Nimrod, the king of Babylon, that built the big tower to heaven, a physical tower to get to the dome, which God had to stop because they were going to succeed. We're going about like, oh, how did they build this? How did they build that? Must have been ancient aliens. No, Nimrod in Babylon managed to build a tower that was literally going to get to the dome, and God had to stop them and confuse their languages and scatter them. He's like, they're going to achieve it. He didn't stop them just for fun. He stopped them because he had to, because they were literally going to get that high up. Can you imagine how big that thing was? It must have been huge. But you look at like Stonehenge and all those old things that they're going, oh, how'd they build it? How'd they build this? How'd they build that? Nephilim, massive giants. These guys were massive, huge, and they could. I'll tell you a story while I think of it. It's Buffalo Bill, a legend recorded by Buffalo Bill when he met the Indians. A group of Pawnees came into camp, bringing with them a number of large bones, one of which a doctor with Cody's expedition identified as a human thigh bone. And they wanted to take that human thigh bone, but they didn't have a wagon with them. They couldn't carry it. They literally needed a wagon to get that thing out of there. Anyway, the Pawnees maintained that the bones belonged to an ancient race. Here's what I'm saying. It's all parallel. And you find stories like this all over the world. An ancient race of men who inhabited the country and were 3 times the size of human beings of the day. Any of these giants could run down a buffalo and tear off its leg with one hand and then eat it as he walked. Can you imagine how big and powerful these bastards were? That's insane. Running along a live buffalo, ripping its leg off and chewing it down. However, these giant men did not believe in the Great Spirit. So we'd call the Great Spirit Yahweh. They were not intimidated by the thunder and lightning, but laughed at it. So you think you see a thunderstorm and you're like, wow, I respect God because that's incredible. These guys would like mock it and laugh at it. They hated God because you think about it, their parents hated God. Their parents got kicked out of heaven, and of course they're a bit sour about it because these were bad angels and they were literally corrupting the earth on purpose. Absolutely hate God. So that's filtered down into them. That's why they're so evil. This angered the Great Spirit, and he sent a great rainstorm that drove the giants to the hills. But the water rose and covered the mountaintops as well, and the conceited giants were drowned. All the major cultures had giant stories and stories of half-breed gods and all this stuff that lines up perfectly parallel with what the Bible has already told us. So the Epic of Gilgamesh is an old story, probably based on a Nephilim because of how powerful and strong he was and the things that he's said to have been able to do. So any story of like demigods or like even the X-Men stuff, the DC stuff, the Marvel stuff, anything with like someone that's part human and part god, or part human, part star child, part any sort of mystic explanation for someone to have these special powers because they've got this special DNA stems from this stuff. There's also stories in Enoch of the angels actually not only sinning with females and making these hybrid human gods, but also sinning against animals, birds and snakes and all the different types of animals. Now it doesn't specify that it was mixing DNA and creating new beings, but it kind of hints at that. And there's a lot of stories of, like, you think of centaurs and like the half horse, half man, the half goat, half man, the god that plays the flute, the little horny goat thing. Baphomet is a goat-headed god, and that the Baphomet thing, it's all dualism because it's male, female. All the tranny stuff, you look at the transpocalypse stuff that I used to write off, and now I'm like, there's something there. There's a lot of trannies high up in just the like Hollywood stuff and in the dark world that we don't perceive around us, there's a lot of trannies involved in that stuff, and it's because their religion of Gnostic dualism is like blending black and white, blending good and evil. So you have to do evil to do good and good to do evil, and it's all just mishmashed together to become more godlike. You've heard that stupid saying, how can God exist? How can God be all good and all powerful? It's impossible. No, it's not impossible, but because they believe that's their belief system, is you have to have good to have evil, which makes no sense. But anyway, it's linked to all the secret society stuff and the worship of the Atlantean beings, who were like a supreme race, if you will. That'll sound familiar, and I'll get to that, and it might trigger you, but it's legit. So Atlantis was a place with a glorious race of radiant blonde beings who used dark magic and light magic, and then someone used dark magic, and there was this big fight, and things got messy, and then it got flooded, and then it got destroyed, and their technology got lost, and da-da-da-da-da-da. I think it's a romantic version of a kingdom that these demigods set up, that the Nephilim set up, and was based on the knowledge that their parents gave them, the fallen angels. And it's a really interesting read, but it's a bit wishy-washy. But basically, all the dualism, all the yin-yang stuff, all the tranny stuff, all the good, evil, everything in the Matrix movie, the Gnostic religion is based on the history of Atlantis, and that's like where that comes from, is this mystery kingdom that was once like running the world. And the master race stuff, Thule, which is their magic power, and that's linked to Hitler. So I'm sorry if you're a Hitler fan. He was really into occult stuff, and the dude was just like every other world leader. So stop putting your faith in men, please, because we only have faith in Jesus and God. You put your faith in any man, Trump, Hitler, anybody, you're going to get let down and be disappointed. So yes, he was into Thule. He was massively involved in occult stuff. That's where he got his idea for the master race stuff. And he was into dualism. That's where the light world order, dark world order stuff that we talked about in a previous video, how they're setting up like their dark world order, which is the satanic, like adrenochrome drinking asshole lying pedophiles, and then you've got the light world order, which is the new age religion of everybody coming together and living peacefully, the coexist stuff, all culminating into a resistance to that, those two fighting, and then possibly the light world order winning. But it's still dualism, it's still all for the same kingdom, and it's still controlled ultimately by Satan. If you'll notice all the old pictures of the giants, they're wearing like these weird little blotch things, and then you look at the movie They Live, which has got lots of parallels between what's actually going on. It's a silly old movie, but it does have some interesting parallels. They wear watches as well. I don't know, just that's something I noticed for no reason. Side note, the buttholes that are running the world are super obsessed with this DNA that they think makes them royal. And what's a good way to collect DNA? Well, you'd have to do some sort of like worldwide DNA swabbing thing, and then have like a database to put that DNA in. And why, when testing for COVID, did they have to put the swab things like all the way that far back in your nose? I don't know. I've never been tested for something like that before, but I don't think that was a normal test, guys. I think there's something more to that picture. But hey, what do I know? I'm just some guy. So yeah, God bless, and I'll see you next time. Bye.